I'm sorry, like this week, the LA Times did a great piece. LA Times did a great series on Sunday, but you're not seeing this in the mainstream. You know, even with the March on Washington, today's the March on Washington anniversary, but the Chicano moratorium happened. And I want to bring in three amazing guests to talk about all this. So let's just bring them on, Geronimo, because I just let them introduce themselves. I know their names, but I hate introducing guests. So once this pops up, bring the guest on. All right, there we go. All right, let's start with Mike over to the top. So Mike, say hi to everyone and who you are and what you do.
How you doing? My name is Mike De La Rocha. I'm a co-founder of Revolve Impact and helping to produce the Schools Not Prisons tour that launches tomorrow to commemorate the anniversary of the 50th anniversary of the Chicano moratorium.
Great, and we're going to talk about that event that we are all a part of. That's going to be exciting. So welcome, Mike. All right, Rosa, you jump in. Say hello.
Sounds good. Hey, I'm Rosa Ochoa. I'm a founding and steering member of Transforming Justice Orange County in Orange County, California.
All right, and then Jorge, give it up. Bring it on home. Say hi to everybody.
Hi, I'm Jorge Antonio Renault, the Texas Vato for Latino Justice, and they have me here, I think, because I'm a peleonero, poeta, and a pinto, and I was kind of around when some of the stuff was happening, and I don't know if anybody else was, man.
I'm gonna totally reveal myself. I was a year old, so so you are definitely gonna be you're leading us with this. So let's start with the 50 years, because obviously in the scope of our community, tomorrow, August 29th, 2020, 50-year anniversary of the Chicano moratorium. Just, I think it's one of the most, it's an incredibly overlooked event in American history, I think. I feel like, I'll start with you, Jorge, but I feel like, yes, this needs to be talked about. Can you, as a Texas Vato, as someone who was back there in the day, can you begin to talk about the events? Because I don't even think there's people who go to Google and know what was happening at the moment. So I want to start with you, because I think you, given the history, will then lead into the conversation that Mike and Rosa and you are going to have.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I'd be glad to. I think that, let's be honest. I was 13 and I was on, I'm almost positive that I was in Beeville at the time, but from the time I was 10 to the time I was 13, we moved around a lot and we followed the crops and we were part of that Chicano cohort, right? Grew up in the fields for a good while. And I was not as aware then as I was maybe 4 or 5 years later of the events that had happened. Things filtered slowly down to Texas, where I was, down to small towns. And I think that Chicano, calling yourself a Chicano, is one of the things that maybe happened a little bit later when I was 15, 16, 17, and I started becoming aware of the things that were going on. And I think that Chicano, calling yourself a Chicano, some of this is one of the word Chicano has gone through so many, oh my God, yes, it's great. It's who we are. One of the things that Ruben Salazar says is that a Chicano is a Mexican American with a non-Anglo view of himself, right? So I kind of adopted that. And then, of course, it became kind of vilified that, no, you're not Chicano. I'm Hispanic, but I'm not a Chicano because I was associated with maybe gangbangers and lowriders. And it's gone through different cycles. So I think that maybe that has something to do with the fact that the contributions, the entire revolutionary aspect that Chicanos brought to the table has kind of been brushed aside.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, what about you? What do you think when I say Chicano moratorium? And, people don't realize it was an anti-war movement, right? It was anti-war. It was the middle of Vietnam. One of the things that I always think about that time, when you think about the anti-war movement, right, back at the time, you don't think about, Chicano and Chicana kids, right, in that movement. You think of, the white liberal, like college hippie, right? So Mike, when you know about the history, what do you think about it? Like when we talk about it, especially in the 50 years?
Yeah, I think I have a very personal view of the Chicano moratorium because my father, when he immigrated from Chihuahua, Mexico, landed in Boyle Heights.
Wow.
And was 16, 17 at the time, and was actively involved in the Chicano movement and actively involved in the Chicano moratorium. And I remember being younger and my father showing me pictures of that time. And a couple things that always resonated with me very profoundly is, one, to your point, Julio, Chicanos were disproportionately being killed in Vietnam. It was one
Right.
of the only ways that folks were being asked to be a part of whatever this country was or is right now. It was a peaceful protest, like you said, to the body bags that were coming predominantly to like East Los Angeles and other enclaves where the Latinx and Chicanos were. And again, similar to like reminiscent, almost eerily to today,
Right.
peaceful protesters being met with tear gas, with weaponry, with military from our LA County Sheriff's Department. That scar, I would argue, was one of the things that was the impetus for my own father to become actively involved in the movement for the liberation of Black and brown people. And he would talk very frankly about being young and having his younger brother, who at the time was, I don't know, like a couple years old, and running away from the madness that was being inflicted by the state. And then it's also just a moment just to be also mindful. It was 50th anniversary of the assassination of Ruben Salazar,
Right.
who was an incredible journalist for the LA Times.
Yep.
And so I just think this is a continued moment and a continued repetition of the way that the state continues to exploit, oppress communities of color. And in this situation, particularly Chicanos and Chicanas. And the last thing I just want to say is, if you look at the photographs from the time, it was a powerful moment of Black and brown solidarity as well.
Word.
And if you look at the banners where folks are talking about, anti-Vietnam, it was banners being carried by Black and brown young people from Los Angeles. You had Black Panthers and Black Liberation Army folks giving out political literature next to Chicanos and others. And so I just want to say this kind of myth of division or what have you is just that, a myth, in that it's a profound moment, not just for Chicanos, but I would say for all people that are working towards a different kind of future and a different kind of world that we have right now.
Yeah, no, all good stuff, Mike. Just a couple of things before I turn it over to you, Rosa. You did mention the death of Ruben Salazar, LA Times journalist who, there's some great video about him and talking about being a Chicano journalist, especially the LA Times, which is going through its own reckoning right now. I have a lot of colleagues in the LA Times who are like, it's not even reflective of the city. And I do recommend people reading the amazing series that all those journalists did that came out on Sunday, and that we're going to actually be talking more about it tomorrow. Now, I do want to talk about tomorrow in a second, but before we do that and turn it over to Rosa, besides Ruben Salazar, there are other three names that died, Gustave Montag, Lynn Ward, and Angel Gilbert Diaz, they're all from Pico Rivera. But Rosa, and what about you when you hear about the movement, that time, that history? What do you think about the Chicano Moratorium, 50 years, and how are you reflecting on it?
I think about the conquistadors. I think about the history that California and LA has had with colonization, and the fact that switching from being called Hispanic to Latino to Chicano to Chicanx, all of these things reflect that story of we're trying to reclaim our narrative. So reflecting back on that time, it shows. It's people wanting to embrace their identity and understand who they are, because that identity has been taken from them, has been stripped and killed, from them for years and years to come. Thinking of all the indigenous people of Mexico and, Semenawak as a whole, which is the Americas, that we don't call it that. And so just thinking about a lot of that history that has been, that's lost, that's buried, or just silenced. So that's what I think about, especially now as we see people talking about it more, that wanting to make it public, all of the abuse, all of the deaths that have come at the hands of police, at the hands of the state and foster care system taking Black and brown children, and trying to make them into their eyes And so that's what I think about, of the fact that like I appreciate all of, you know, my ancestors growing up and seeing the things that they fought for and that we're still fighting for today. And I hope for the, you know, this movement to continue and to get louder so that people, you know, more people join.
You know, there's so many things that you guys brought up that are so relevant. And I'm stuck with Mike's, you know, each one of you brought these things that are incredibly relevant. And here we are 50 years later. But I am stuck with Mike's comment, right? About, you know, it's called the Chicano Moratorium, but it was, you know, brown, black, solidarity. There's a history of sort of this shared mission, especially during the anti-war movement, where communities of color were disproportionately dying, just like they're disproportionately dying now in a global pandemic or with law enforcement. And something happened, right, Mike? Like something, whether it's divide and conquer, whether it's like, you know, you have a president that tells, you know, the African-American community that the Mexicans are taking your jobs and like we have to, you know, all these things are happening. But you want to, let's talk about what's happening tomorrow, because tomorrow is the 50th anniversary. And there's going to be an event that is actually going to be on Latino Rebels with Latino Justice, much deeper. Mike, you want to talk about like why you're making the announcement tomorrow and how you make, because there are connections here, right? I think it's easy to go back to history, look at the pictures and say, the Chicano movement, there's a romanticism to it, but it's actually a step to the next step, right? And so why don't you share what's happening tomorrow and the announcement you guys are making?
Yeah, first I just want to say, Jorge, I put on this hat for you. Just to make sure that we know that our loved ones that have been impacted by this state, whether they be incarcerated or formerly, have always been at the forefront of what we've been doing. So tomorrow, we're really excited. So Schools Not Prisons is a thriving online community, but it's also a series of arts and music festivals that we've been producing with grassroots organizations across the country, specifically in communities where they've been disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration. And so tomorrow, we thought it was fitting, because of COVID, we're launching a virtual tour to do it on the anniversary. We have an incredible lineup. But like everything, as an artist myself, I've always seen the arts and culture, music in particular, has always been a vehicle to not just educate, but to move people to action, to move and onboard people into local organizing. And so we've just been very grateful to be partnering with Rosa and all kinds of incredible activists and organizations, because we have the ability and the power to stop the expansion of a jail that is being built, that I'll have her talk more about. But the continuation that I want to connect it to is that when you look at the Chicano Moratorium and you look at what's happening today, there's a direct one-to-one correlation. It's a fight for not only our own human and civil rights, but it's literally us trying to dismantle a system of oppression that was designed to keep particular communities in particular places. And when you see uprisings or rebellions like the Chicano Moratorium was, again, a peaceful uprising, the state continues to meet us with resistance, with murder, with lynching, what have you. And you don't have to look too much farther than, Wisconsin, when you have a white supremacist with an AK-47 literally walking by with his hands up by tanks with police officers saying thank you while we're killing and brutalizing Black and brown bodies every single day. And so what I just really want to emphasize is the movement for Black lives, the movement for all of our collective liberation. It's literally tied to this history, the shared history, but it's literally tied to other forms of state violence that happen in cages every single day in this country. And Schools Not Prisons is literally about trying to not just raise awareness, but to have folks understand that we can have a different way of dealing with issues of poverty, dealing with issues of mental health, dealing with issues of a white supremacist history that continues to oppress us. So I'm just very grateful to be in community with all of you. Rosa will do a way more elegant job of talking about the campaign.
You did a good start. You got a good start. Rosa, take it. The baton has been passed over to you, and then you're going to pass it over to Jorge because, so go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Mike. Yes, yeah. We're here, so Transforming Justice, Orange County. We're working to decarcerate Orange County. We're an abolitionist group that's looking to provide education to the communities, bring people into this work. And as you know, people have been chanting, defund the police, defund the sheriffs. The Orange County jails has had a notorious history of violence and negligence by the Orange County Sheriff's Department. There has been countless deaths due to their negligence and their violence. They're torturing people inside. There has been a number of groups, including NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Health Illness, that has done research that you can't get well in a cell. That anybody who goes into jail, into prison, you cannot get the adequate care that you need. You cannot get any of the medication that you need. And then on top of that, you're getting additional trauma placed upon you and not provided any sort of support. So as of now, what we're doing, our main campaign is education of the conditions in the jails, letting people go, as well as there is a jail facility in Irvine, California, called the James A. Music Facility. So Music has been a jail. It was one of like the first jails actually built in Orange County, and the Orange County Sheriff's Department, time and time again, has been wanting to expand it. Since actually 1990, they closed the jail. They emptied out the beds because they wanted to prepare for this expansion, hoping to get more money, adding 2 additional housing units, 900 additional beds. But during this pandemic, through the works of Transforming Justice Orange County, as well as other grassroots organizations, we've been able to demand people be released that are medically vulnerable, especially during this time of the pandemic. So our jails are currently under capacity. And yet, the Orange County Sheriff's Department and the Orange County Board of Supervisors are demanding that we but during this pandemic, that we spend $288 million on this empty jail. It makes no sense. And the Orange County, like on top of all of that, on top of the money, on top of the fact that we're in a recession, on top of that we're in a pandemic, that there are countless houseless people who are demanding for support and needing help, that they want to spend this money, that now they're trying to claim that this jail is going to be for mental health services, that these additional beds are for mental health sake. But we know that that's not true. It's just the way that they're spinning it. Mental health illness has been on the rise in the public, but disproportionately in jails and prisons. So this is where we're calling. So we were very excited and happy to partner with Revolve Impact and Latino Justice to have this concert, to be able to show and bring to light Stop the Music jail expansion, because it's not needed. We don't need no more jails and jail expansion. So we're doing this in Orange County. We're also collaborating with other organizations in Los Angeles, Orange County, and across the nation to just say no new jails, period. We can have a better life for all of us. We can have freedom and equality, and that is possible. We just need to actively choose to make this different. So I appreciate being here and being able to share about our campaign.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And for people, when you hear Stop the Music, it's MUSICK. That's the name of the jail, but it's a play on words, because people are like, "What music? What? You're gonna stop?" No. It's a clever way to present it. Jorge, you've written, we've had the pleasure of publishing you on Latino Rebels, and you wrote a recent piece about what it is to be an abolitionist, and because you have a history. Do you want to share? Because I'm very honored that you're on with us, because when I read, I've been reading your pieces and your work, and I've never met you personally. So I already have my, when you read writers, right, you're like, oh my God, I'm talking to you. So can you break down the importance of this because of your life experience? Like, because I don't think people, I know you've talked about it, but this is the first time you're talking to us about it. So I want to hear why this is so important for you.
Yeah, and I want to do that and maybe touch on a little bit that Mike was talking about this vision of Blacks and Chicanos and Black
absolutely
solidarity. But then kind of your comment that has that continued, or have we fostered that?
Go for it.
Well,
Go for it.
Yeah, growing up as a Chicano and finally becoming aware, California to us and Texas was a distant land, but it was like another country. What we heard about was Cesar, and that's what we knew was Cesar, right? What we knew was maybe Jose Angel Gutierrez and the Muniz, family in Crystal City, and we heard a lot, of course, of Porky once Jose Joaquin came out right up in Colorado. And being from New Mexico, I knew a lot about the land grant stuff, right? About the storming of the county jails down there by Reyes López Tijerina, and all of that I think was geared around the Chicano mythology of Aztlán, about this is our land, you have appropriated our land, this is our country, and we're going to reclaim it. And I think events in history kind of overtook us because of all the stuff that the U.S. was fomenting down in Central and South America. And now here come people from Honduras and El Salvador and Panama, right? And all these other countries. And Chicanos kind of felt, I think, in a way, besieged, forgotten in a way. And I think there has been a kind of a reluctance to actually realize, and this is because so much of our people get refreshed, I think. And I kept seeing that throughout the years, people getting refreshed. And I saw it in prison, right? I saw the little cliques of los cubanos acá, los puertorriqueños acá, and there was no sense of Latinx solidarity, right? There was Mexicans and there was Chicano, and there was just, and that's almost been carried up, to the outside. And I think now there is also a sense that because we are the Mexican Americans are by far the numerical majority among the Latinx population. And I think there is a sense among some of the activists and the organizers that the Black Lives Movement, that Black Lives Matter, has taken away from their history, from their efforts, right or wrong, right? I'm saying that's what's felt on the ground in some senses, right? And we have to struggle with that because there has been a history of racism toward Black individuals from our people as far back as we can remember.
Oh, anti-Blackness is real.
And we have to remember, I remember sitting in the day rooms and watching Telemundo, having a fight for an hour of Telemundo, right? Because everyone wanted to watch Jerry Springer, oh my goodness, and all this other stuff, right? And fighting for that. And even on the television, everyone was white.
Yeah.
I mean, so we have to continually ask ourselves, what are the things that we are doing actually to create that solidarity with our Black brothers? Not only the African Americans, right, but the Afro Latinos in our communities. And on every panel that we're on, every place that we're at, we have to look around and say, where are our comrades, right? And I think that Chicanos who did not grow up with that, right, who looked at Puerto Ricanos and Dominican Republic and Cubanos as almost another species in a way. I mean, telling you honest, from the way it was down here in Texas, right? It's like, this is like an exhilarating experience to work with an organization that has people from those places, that has people from Ecuador and from Chile, and now we have people from California. I mean, my God. But I mean, it's an experience that you can only face with authenticity. And I was one of the guys in Texas prisons. I almost got beat up pretty bad one time because they told me I wasn't a real Chicano, because I was spending my time out in the fields talking to some of the guys who were Muslims. And these guys were determined to spend their time educating themselves and their comrades. And my Chicano brothers were almost exclusively determined to walk around with brown pride, Chicano lives, and they were killing each other on the yards. And speaking to those things, right? Being called, and this is what they would call me, a mayatero, in the joint, right? Was a difficult thing to do. So I would have questions, I would have conversation with folks. What is a real Chicano? Define to me what a real Chicano is, right? So those are some of the things I think that we have to face and talk about when it comes to actually unifying the movements, right? Coming together, not only with that, but with the immigration movement, right? There are all these movements that have all these points of intersection, right? That we sometimes treat as separate movements, and we maybe give them a sort of, oh yeah, that's great, unity, but what are we really doing to foster that unity and bring that unity to the table in ways that matter? So you asked me, man, so that's...
Wow, just, keeping it real. But, thank you. First of all, thank you guys for all your voices. We're at the bottom of the hour. This is a great conversation. I haven't got any comments from our producer, Jeronimo, so I'm hoping we're doing all right. Even a private chat or anything would help.
Right.
I was like, I'm having a great time with this conversation, but I just want to make sure, to all our people that are watching us on Facebook, YouTube, I think we're on Twitch and Twitter. I don't know where we are, but it's great. And if you have any live comments or questions, put them on social, and Jeronimo, our producer, will share them in the chat and we'll read them to you. But listen, let's talk a little bit about what's been presented this week, right? Because here we go, right? And especially with Kenosha, and especially with the Republican National Convention, and you start hearing words like anarchist and leftist radicals and violent protesters and mob rule. A lot of words that when I think about, when you look at the history, even of the Chicano Moratorium, when you look at the history, it's, people were saying it 50 years ago. Rosa, how do you begin to reconcile with that in terms of seeing, I would think, like uprisings, right? Because uprisings against what the system is, and they're uncomfortable, right? They're uncomfortable. They're not, they're challenging power, but you have this, you have a president on a pulpit for 4 days with his mostly white buddies, with a couple of, POC who might be striving for whiteness. I know I'll get in trouble for that, but I try to keep it real. But Rosa, how do you begin? Because there is such a backlash right now. And even at the time when Nixon was running for president, I mean, he was saying, if you look at some of the videos from Nixon during the time, you could take those videos and play them now, right? So how do you begin to see, how do you challenge power in the work that you do, or even just look at it in this country? Rosa, why don't we start with you?
It's definitely, it's difficult. And I think one thing to remind folks is the fact that we are getting this pushback means that that this is working. For myself, in which I spent many years of my life, because, as was mentioned, of, the anti-Blackness, the racism in Hispanic culture. I got raised by Colombian parents, and there were these thoughts of mejor de la raza, that you attempt to be white for that privilege, for that power. And as I grew up and started to acknowledge the different powers that were being put on me, the different systems of oppression. So for myself, I've now started to embrace I'm a queer, non-binary, non-monogamous, and this challenges a lot of people. So for me, it's working to build the network, to feel brave, to find that courage to speak up, because there's so many people that they don't get, the pronouns, they don't get the changes in names. And these sorts of challenges is what has been underlying these systems of white supremacy and patriarchy and colonialism. They're so ingrained in our lives that we can't think past our own initial happiness and success, that we can break down that. I think with really embracing the abolitionist movement, I know that this is hard for people. It challenges people to tell people hey, think about gender. What does that mean to you? What are men? What are women? And these ideas are challenging to your core, but they're necessary. They're necessary to find freedom for all of us. And I know that, it's going to be the strategy of working, inside with the advocacy, with the legislation, as well as out in the streets, making it loud, as well as in the home. So it's all of these components that need to be added up together. And so seeing more people, fighting back, speaking up, sharing their truth. We've been taught although, you know, we've been taught that truth is supposed to be, you know, highly valued, something to share, for the most
Right.
part, we're always told not to. We're always told to be either silent or lie.
Right.
And if we actually embraced our truth and our expression, it's going to be scary. It's going to be ugly, but we're going to get to more freedom and more expression. And I really look forward, and I really hope that more people will embrace that. Find your community. You know, there's different groups, whether it's small. And if you don't find your community, build your community. I think that's another thing that we're trying to do here in Orange County, is that building from the abolitionist movement, alternatives to incarceration, community alternatives to 911. So
Right.
building those teams, building those pods, seeing what it can be different, and you know, power to the people. That's what I'm looking forward to out of this movement, is seeing more people come together.
Mike, what about you? I mean, what you've seen in the last week. What are you thinking about all this?
Yeah, I mean, two things I guess I just want to like center is, one is that America is built on this incredibly destructive mindset and centers whiteness at the expense of everything else. And as someone that benefits from whiteness as a light-skinned Chicano, it's a constant reminder to check my own anti-Blackness that is part and parcel of this experiment known as, you know, the United States. The one thing that I would say that I always go back to is from the Chicano Moratorium, since you know, we're celebrating it tomorrow.
I love when we can make these connections, Mike. Please.
Yeah.
Yes, this is great.
So my father, along with 13 other Chicanos, were some of the first to go to UC Santa Barbara. And UC Santa Barbara is another critical historical place because it's the birth of Mecha, and a lot of things that happen that have impacted Latinos across the country. But there's a photo that I have in my office of a demonstration where the Black Student Union at UC Santa Barbara took over the administrative building. And Black students took over the center, were inside, but outside was my father and all kinds of other Chicana and Chicano students with the bullhorns being in solidarity. You fast forward to today, and it's so important to actually name like Black Lives Matter, and specifically though the name Patrisse Cullors and Opal Tometi and Alicia Garza, you know, predominantly queer Black women that have shifted American power, for however you want to say it. The law and order kind of rhetoric that Trump was spewing yesterday, directly to Rosa's point, is a direct response to these Black women and all of us in solidarity saying no more. And not only saying no more, but today is the first time in decades where we're having a national Black convention where we're going to have the ability to together imagine and work towards a world that we know is indeed possible, right? And so the last thing I will say is someone that's continued to be inspired by the Zapatista movement is that Comandante Marcos always said that we are the same because we are different. And so if we can see the beauty in the difference, but also see the beauty of shared struggles and histories, we are literally creating these mutual aid networks in real time because of COVID. We're creating these mutual aid networks because we're about to have the largest eviction that this country has ever seen in a few months, you know? And my strength comes from being in a community with like the three of you and others, because no matter what happens, I know I cannot necessarily rely on the state, but I can rely on people. And I think that is the basis. If I look at thousands of protesters during the Chicano Moratorium, what was compelling them to move forward was this radical politics of love. This idea that I was not standing up against oppression for myself, I was standing up against oppression for all of us. And so that's where I feel this legacy, this responsibility to continue to be in solidarity, to continue to build multi-identity coalitions, because our ancestors did that, will continue to do that. But if you think about it, all of our ancestors, regardless of what continent they're from, their dream was that we would actually be in communication with each other right now, because this kind of communication is what feeds us, what helps us become better organizers, strategists, dreamers, artists, what have you. And so I think for me, that's the ultimate legacy of the Chicano Moratorium. It's like, it's a symbol, not just of resistance, but a symbol of like despite what you did, despite the murder and assassination of our leaders, we built ethnic studies. We built these programs. You know, we are here. We are the majority.
We've always been here, and we
Right.
ain't leaving, and we're going to figure it out whether you like it or not. Jorge, what about you and seeing what you saw? I mean, there was a lot of talk about prison reform this week, you know, and I know your writings, you know, you're an abolitionist, like looking at it through the eyes of an abolitionist and this sort of law and order narrative. What are your thoughts about this week and all that's gone on?
A deep sense of sadness, to be honest with you, in a lot of ways, because as an abolitionist, I think you're sometimes caught up in the mythology one about abolition. What it means is that, oh my God, no police, no cages. So what happens when, right? And you're always faced with answering that question. And I try to flip it in no, you maybe need it. It's a lack of imagination. How about asking ourselves what happens if? We have to get away with the accepted idea that violence and harm are inevitable, right? They don't have to be inevitable. We live in a society that has made us think that they're inevitable and that the only response to them is caging people. And I think that having to fight the necessary evils of incrementalism, right? That sometimes present themselves in a way that vilify certain individuals, that vilify people who have been accused and maybe did certain crimes, and say, no, those are the ones that we need to cage. This group of individuals, and most of them looking like me, most of them with brown or black skin, are the ones who we have to keep incarcerated because they're the ones that you have to fear. These are the ones that you can let back into society. These are the ones who you can let out because of COVID. These are the ones who are human, right? The other ones, it's okay to make them others. And that's a strain that,
did we lose
you know, unfortunately, in the immigration struggle, one of the things that we have to face a lot is, and that we have deep, profound discussions on, is, well, do we fight for someone who's over here and is undocumented and has been convicted of certain crimes, and then it comes back with, well, maybe DWI, maybe whatever, maybe some other things, right? But those are struggles that we have to fight with when we're actually pursuing abolition, right? Because, like Rosa said, it's a battle to give power to those who we have historically disempowered.
You know, there's so many things here that just really jump out in terms of where we go next, right? And you guys have all touched upon different points. I try to always remember, and you know, these personal stories of people acting out, right? Saying like, I am going to speak out. I'm gonna, you know, perform good trouble. And I think you see that in a lot of levels now, right? And understanding our ancestors and our legacy and who came before us, and knowing that history is repeating itself in a lot of ways. And what do you learn from that? So I guess my question to each one of you, at least as we look at this a little bit more holistically in the next couple of months, because you know, it is going to play in the national consciousness, right? There's going to be, you know, it's what Jorge was saying, is like, imagine a world without this. You know, I don't think we've ever had that possibility, right? And because power is power. Like, power is, once you have the power, you're not going to be like, hey, I'm done with the power. Here's the power for you. I mean, the world, you look at the history of the world, power is never given, right? It's never given. It is always taken. And it has always been, you know, and this is, and you're seeing this power being played now. But I'm just going to toss it out to you guys because each one of you do the work. And it is, you know, in a time of technology and social media and being labeled and being, you know, I'm sure each, you know, if you haven't been doxxed, I'm sure, you know, it will happen. You know, this sort of, we live in this world that if you think critically or if you think independently, you're still being labeled as someone who You know what I mean? It's like you're being dehumanized in a lot of ways. So how do each one of you get through that? Because we kind of tend to forget that we have to give ourselves sort of this human, like what drives each one of you to say like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm doing this tomorrow again. This shit is hard. This administration, you know, what I saw or what I do, and, you know, people are still getting disproportionately, they're suffering. And it's not victimization, because I think that's the other part that everyone seems to matter. It's like anyone that talks about oppression is talking about being victimized, which I find to be bullshit. It's actually the other way around. It's being empowered to bring your voices. So how do each one of you cope with that? So anyone can jump in. Just, I'm not even going to I want to have a conversation in the next 15 minutes. Feel good. Who wants to go first?
I cope with it poorly.
See, you're being honest.
No, seriously.
No, tell me why. Because I think that's important. I think it's sometimes this whole notion of resilience and, you know, being, it's like, yeah, it's like, it's bullshit. You're human. Like, tell me more about that, because I don't think people hear that as much as they should.
I've been out of prison 12 years, and I'm on parole till 2051, and kind of made a living as a professional, formerly incarcerated person, as an ex-con, right? Telling my story in a way, continue to tell my story in a way that hopefully humanizes the individuals who were there with me and who are still there and who were already planning to send there 20 years on down the road because of the color of their skin. And I sometimes think I should have just been a damn construction worker. This shit wears at your soul. And I still dream of prison 2 or 3 nights a week. And I have substance abuse issues, and I have to put myself in a rehab. And this is wearying, heavy, hard shit. And then the going across the country and seeing maybe Manuel in California. What I'm talking about is the CJ movement, right? There are many other movements, but the CJ movement itself, right? Speaking of Zapatistas, Manuel, all of us are none used to be, and I forget who he works with now in California, and Steve Lefton down here, and some others. And there's so few people who I can call Chicano who are in this movement, right? It is hard, man. So yeah, how do I get through it? It's just, dude, from the Eastern point of view, it's mindfulness. From our point of view, it's one day at a time.
Yeah.
The only way I can do it.
All right, man. Thanks. I mean, that's, wow, that hit me. I don't know about you guys, Mike or Rosa, but what do you feel like with Jorge's words, or how do you cope? Rosa, you want to take the next? You want to go, or?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. It's depressing. It's hopeless. It's hard. The thing that I work through to keep me moving is the fact that the pain of getting, beat up by police, being shunned by people outside, by neighbors, to be, name called and attacked by the, Nazis here. I live in Huntington Beach, and there are they just walk around, and it's no messing around, and it's scary. The hope that I have is by continuing to talk about it, doing the transformative justice work with my family, with my friends, with the organizations that I work with, slowly starting to do this thing to have people choose compassion and people over power. Because it's true that, slowly there is starting to do this thing. You harm somebody, you get power. You, do something that takes control, gives you happiness. You have to actively choose. And that's like the strength in it, is that you have to actively choose to stand up. If you see somebody getting name called, see somebody getting attacked, to pull out your phone and to video or to step in, to have just a conversation with somebody who's houseless and to talk to them, to starting to look at the budget and see what can you do. I hope, the thing that brings me hope is the hope for more people to choose to stand up for all the lives lost, Black trans lives lost, all of these people until I know I saw like a question that had come in that talked about how do we talk about this since we're always separating one against the other, is that we talk about all of us. We talk about the person who's been most persecuted, and until they can walk out their door and feel free and feel comfortable in their own skin and what they want to wear and how they want to dress, until then, we all are slaves to the system. So yeah, it's definitely hard work, emotional work, but I hope for people to feel more empowered to take this up and continue this movement.
Yeah. What about you, Mike?
I just first want to say thank you, Jorge, for your vulnerability.
Yeah.
For modeling the ways that at least myself as a straight male can deconstruct patriarchy in particular. I think self-care is critically important and something that, like, I know speaking for my family, we weren't taught how to take care of ourselves. We were just taught to work and be humble.
Suck it up.
And
Yeah. Suck it up. Keep moving. Keep grinding. Yeah. Aguanta bien. Yeah.
And I wanted to just quote this because I think it's important. Audre Lorde, who's an incredible activist, poet, who's now an ancestor of ours, but she said, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." And I think for me, how I do that is going back to our cultural traditions and practices that were intentionally stripped from us, indigenous practices in particular, whether they're from the continent of Africa or wherever, native to this land. There's so many things. I was blessed to be a part of a Olympia with farm workers 2 months ago, and just understanding our connection to nature and how the energy from sage or the energy just from the leaves or the trees are things that people want to demonize or just say that doesn't work. But I could tell you, when I sage myself and my son or my family, it's scientifically proven that the neurons and energy is being cleared. And so for me, I dig in deeply into our cultural practices, because I think the one thing, if you look at history, they saw Mexicanos or black and brown folks, they still saw us for our labor. But if you were indigenous, it was genocide. It was just like you needed to be murdered. And the reason why I believe is because of the root in the land and spirit. And that spirituality to me is the way that we overcome Trumpism or whatever, because that is the root to what essentially you're saying, Rosa. If you want to talk to all of us, there's a spiritual component. And I think those practices are what will sustain us as we survive this next moment.
It's interesting with the three of you, just listening to your words. And again, I'm with you, Mike, on Jorge. Like what you said, I'm still like shaking, right? You're being vulnerable. Like that's strength. That is strength and wisdom and maturity. But I think the point that you learn, and something that I've talked about with Maria Hinojosa, who is my partner in podcasting, about our ancestors have had to survive, right? And they did, right? And how did they survive? And we start going back and looking at what you said, Mike. It's like a lot of what we do, it's repeating itself, right? And to bring it back to the Chicano Moratorium, I think about those 16 to 17, 18-year-old kids, right? Yeah. They're probably still, there's plenty who have passed, but there's plenty who are still alive, and they're, 68, 69, 70, and they might be in Boyle Heights, or they might be displaced now because, gentrification, and they might be another part of LA or, and with a family. And the stories, right? You shared them, Mike, too, about your own dad, right? The stories. And so I tell people, like, listen to voices like Jorge, listen to people who have been there, ask them the questions, because sometimes what we learn is already been learned, right? And I feel like this feeling of here we are again, because it's tough. I mean, it's hard. I'm a political journalist. I had to cover the Republican National Convention this week. As my colleague, as a good friend, the professor of Princeton, Eddie Glaude, who's on MSNBC, when he was on In the Thick last week. He said, "Get ready for the white festival," and I say that because it's accurate. Because what we saw was whiteness, American whiteness. And I know that pisses people. Some people get pissed off about that. And they're like, oh, that's racist. I'm like, no, it's what we have created. What has white supremacy created in this country? How has this country been built? And you need to stop with the knee-jerk reaction, because whiteness, in that sense, has been built on violence. And you see it. And so it's reactive, right? So a final thought for each one of you. We have like 5 minutes left. And I just want to, if you just give me that final thought about, like, here we are, we're having an American conversation. And I say that, Lou Holtz will be the first one to tell me that I am not someone who loves where I come from. I am not someone who places this country that was built on violence, that shows no love for its people, which is bullshit. Because, I'm of the Frederick Douglass world, right? That you have to question Doc Rivers said it best this week, coach of the Clippers. It's like, I love this country, but they don't love us, right? And now those words hit. So each one of you, how do you wrap it up? Rosa, we start with you, then Mike, and then Jorge, and we can bring it on home. But how do you struggle with that? Any final last thoughts about all this?
You made me think about the whole, they love our culture, they love our food, but they don't love us. And until people start embracing, more people start questioning themselves, start tearing down those white supremacist, patriarchal, colonial thoughts, we're gonna get to see some change. And it's gonna be a beautiful world that we can build, that we can thrive in, for all of the arts and all the creatives out there, for all the queer people, that change is coming. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of this happen. And you're right about reflecting on our ancestors, seeing how those practices have been done and how to incorporate that into our lives now, how to incorporate that into our communities. Yeah. Bring that back, learn your neighbors, make your pods. So find those spaces where you can be brave, you can speak up, and you can express yourself. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Mike, what about you?
I'll just say 3 points. 1, the future's in color.
I love
Number
it.
2, societal transformation is not separate from self-transformation. So really consciously doing that. And 3rd, please watch the School's Not Prison show tomorrow, because there's incredible activists and organizers and artists. You can watch it live at schoolsnotprisons.us, as well as at Latino Rebels. And I just want to say humbly thank you, all of you, the 3 of you and everyone else behind the scenes in front, for the work that you do. It sustains me and it inspires me. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. And Jorge, what about you?
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day about when people take off on that 2,000-mile trek with their stuff on their back and their kids in their chanclas. What's driving them? Is it actually, I need to leave this place, or that place I'm going to? And what do they have in their head? What dream do they have? What have they built in their head? And is there any truth to that? And we have to think that there's more than just a dream here, that we have in fact accepted the best of all of us and of everyone who's come to this country, and that somehow we have to battle through this period that we have now, that we've battled through many of the other periods. It's never been what we've always envisioned it to be, but I think we've always been striving to some sort of ideal, and that's what drives people to still want to come. And I believe in people like Mike and Rosa and yourself and Jeronimo and those people who want to put this on and allow these sort of discussions. I believe in us, man.
Yeah. In the end, that you have to be that. I think you have to be explicit. One of the reasons why I formed Latino Rebels and why we're part of Futuro Media now, because of Maria Hinojosa. It's about voices. It's about safe space. It's about, just speaking out and being brave and realizing that we are here and we can have these conversations and have them in a way that it's with love and respect. I have learned so much from the 3 of you, fantastic people. Come back, everyone. All you guys watching, come back 5:45 Eastern Standard tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. You know, there's going to be it's going to be some great. You just if you like this, we're actually going to see more short docs, the program, great voices talking about it, and so thank you guys so much. Thank you again. Much love and peace. We'll be back tomorrow on Saturday, and if you like this, we're going to be back next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard. So. We're just going to keep rolling. I just do what Jeronimo and Juan Cartagena tell me to do. You know, life is simple. Yeah, life is simple. Just what they tell me to do, I show up. But much love to all of you guys, and we are out of here. We'll be back tomorrow and also next Friday. Peace out, everyone.
Thank you, man. One more.